Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to week 6 of building our Thompson Center reboot of the 19th century Hawken style muzzleloader rifle. Last week we finished sanding the stock, and next week we're going to use a stock filler to give our walnut the color we want and fill in all the tiny little pores to make it super smooth. Alright, now a few weeks ago we polished the barrel using a technique called draw filing. Now the instructions said that the barrel is going to be the easiest piece of hardware to finish because even though it has the most surface area, it's made up entirely of flat surfaces. And this week we're going to be polishing all the other pieces of hardware that need it. And it could be a little tricky because even though they're smaller, they're kind of goofy shaped pieces. That's with lots of curves and tiny little areas you got to get into. So I think the real challenge is going to be blending all of the little areas that we're working on so that there's a seamless transition between all of them. All right, so let's take a look at those parts we'll be working on. All right, this doesn't look too bad. There's really just not a lot of parts. There's only 2 steel parts here. This is called the rib, and this is the barrel tang. But they look pretty straightforward. They're flat surfaces, much like the barrel. So I think we'll be able to use the same technique that we used in the barrel, and that should make pretty short work of those parts. And the rest, like the patch box here, the butt plate, the fore end cap, trigger guard, and these little miscellaneous brass pieces, they're all brass. So obviously the brass is much softer than the steel, so I don't even think I'm going to have to touch the file. I think it's all going to be emery cloth and crocus cloth work. On one hand, I imagine it could be easier because it's so soft, it'll be fast. But at the same time, it's possible that it could be less forgiving than the steel. Like one wrong move, and now you've got a gouge that you got to work out. So we'll see. I think the first thing I'll do is we'll work on these steel parts here to get them out of the way. All right, we don't want to just tighten the vise like this because the metal will dent the vise jaws more than they already are. So we got these little shimmy shims we'll put in here. That way when we tighten the vise, like so, the barrel tang here, if anything, is going to mark up these little shims and not the jaws. All right, here we go. All right, now I'm not worried about the side of the tang here because that's going to be buried in the wood, but I am going to use the emery cloth here just to break the sharp corner between the top and the side of it. All right, well, I was working on this plate for a long time, and it didn't matter how hard I tried. I just wasn't getting the mirror finish that I was looking for. The instructions said to use the crocus cloth, which is what I was using. Now there's different grit crocus cloths, and the package that I'm using says fine, so I don't know if there's an extra fine or a very fine or something, but what I was trying is I would try the crocus cloth, and then I would get the finest sandpaper that I had around, which was 600 grit, and it got about as smooth as it was getting with the crocus cloth. So I think the crocus cloth that I'm using is about the equivalent of the 600 grit sandpaper. I did some research to try to determine the grit equivalent of crocus cloth, and I really couldn't find anything. So, but like I said, based on my experience, this, what I'm using here, seems to be about the equivalent of a 600 grit. So what I did is I went out and got some 1000 grit sandpaper, 1500 grit sandpaper, and 2000 grit sandpaper, and brass polish. Right now, all this sandpaper is called wet or dry sandpaper. A lot of sandpaper is intended to just use dry. I think the difference is the paper backing will not hold up if it's wet. This is called wet or dry, so you can use it dry, but if you use it wet with like water or oil, the idea is that the liquid will help wash away any loose grit particles, resulting in a smoother finish than you would get if you just did it dry. You know, if you're just going back and forth dry, all the little grit particles will just kind of keep rolling around, whereas the idea with the water is it'll wash it off. So we'll be keeping the paper wet, and since this is a small piece, I think it'll be easy enough just to dunk our part in water to kind of rinse the grit off of the workpiece as well. So we'll see how that's going to work. I think it's going to work pretty. I think it's going to do the job. Okay, so we're going to start with our 1000 grit sandpaper. I ripped a little square off and I folded it over on itself to make it easier to hold on to. I got myself an orange bucket that I filled with deionized water. All right, I boiled it. No, I'm just kidding. It's just tap water. Okay, well that's looking real good. So I'm gonna move on to 1500 grit sandpaper, and I'm gonna go, most of the work that I did last time was going this direction. So now with the 1500, I'm gonna go this direction until all the lines that I see going this way are gone. Here we go. Okay, working from the 1500 up from the 1000 went a lot faster than the 1000 from the 600 or whatever it was before that. So now the last step, well, the second to last step rather, is to try the 2000 grit. Again, this time I'll go this way, and we'll see what it looks like, and then we'll try and put our brass polish on and see what happens. So what we got is Brasso. I think it's popular among brass polish connoisseurs. I guess it's kind of like the Kleenex of brass polish. It says just to shake well and put it on a cloth and rub it in. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay, so we got it all in there. Now I'm just gonna, I don't know, I guess I'll try little circles. It's not perfect, but it is a lot better. Look, you can, look, it's shiny enough that you can see my face right there. Try not to stare. So, and it's possible that when we lacquer, you know, this or whatever it is that we do to protect the brass, it might even further finish up some of these tiny little polishing marks. But for now, we're gonna call it a win. Okay, so this is the fore-end cap, for which I have fashioned a little jig to attach it to, just to make it easier to hold in place, because if I had to hold this thing to do it, it'd be really annoying. Now, the existing polishing lines are going up and down this way, which would be like along the length of the stock. So I'm polishing it this way, again, to go against, you know, create like a checkered pattern. Hopefully that eventually will disappear to only have lines going this way, which is what I'll know, which is how I'll know that I've successfully removed all the lines from the last polishing op. Okay, so there's our finished fore-end cap. All right, guys, well, once again, I'm really happy with the progress we made this week. We hit a little bump in the road when the crocus cloth wasn't getting the brass as polished as we wanted, as smooth as we wanted it. But after we got that extra fine grit sandpaper, the 1000, 1500, 2000 grit sandpaper, everything really seemed to work the way that that we wanted it to and you'd expect it to. The draw filing of the steel parts worked just as well as it worked on the barrel. And just making sure to keep changing directions every time we changed sandpaper grits on the brass parts worked really well and left us with that mirror finish we were looking for. One thing I have to do still regarding the brass is look in to see if it makes sense to apply some sort of clear coat to prevent it from tarnishing. But other than that, all of our metal hardware is done being polished. And the only thing left for the steel parts is coloring them. I don't know yet if it's going to be browning or blackening or bluing or what. I still have to look into that. But first we have to finish the stock. So I got to get my hands on some stock filler for next week that we can use to color the stock as well as give it that glass-like smooth finish that we're looking for. Until then, thanks for watching and have a good week.